Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us for UI5ers Live. Today at my side are Jiawei Cao. Say hello to the group. So yeah, then
hello,
Stefan. Yeah.
Then
Stefan Beck. You said already hello.
That's
yeah.
Hello, yeah.
Yeah. Peter Muessig.
Hi everyone.
And Andreas Kunz.
Hello.
Yeah, and what we want to discuss with you are firstly perceived performance, or rather the placeholder concept we currently implemented to UI5. It's actually not been finalized yet, but we think it has reached a fair level that we can receive your early feedback on it. And yeah, but more about this in a moment by Jiawei. Then the second topic is the transition of our UI controls to using the UI5 Web Components. This is performed by Peter. He has been preparing a demo to show how all this is put together. So let's start. And yeah, with this, I would hand over to Jiawei.
I would like to give you a short introduction about a feature that we are actually developing right now. So it's not finalized yet. So what you see and hear today, it's only a preview version of the of this feature, and everything is subject to change in the future. So, so as you can see in the title, it's called the placeholder screen in UI5. I have here actually a screenshot, and I think after you see the screenshot, you immediately know what I'm talking about here. So the placeholder screen, it's some dummy div elements that we cover the whole application area at the very beginning in the process of loading the application. So before this application's real UI elements are fully loaded. So this is really important for improving the perceived performance for the end user. Although the application is running at the same speed as before, but once we can show to the end user some elements at the very beginning of loading the application before the UI is ready, the final UI for the application, and it actually feels better or feels faster that the application now runs. So talk about this, we want to show a placeholder when the application is being started. We also want to show this placeholder once we navigate to another screen inside the application. And talking about placeholder, so a placeholder must be shown as early as possible to give the user immediate feedback that is something is going on inside the application. Either it's from the very beginning or after triggering a navigation. And because the UI, what matters the most is actually the real UI from the application. That's why we also need to hide the placeholder at the right time point. So we thought that right time point would be when the application screen is ready and it doesn't change anymore. So we will talk about this later. And we also decided to make the placeholder lightweight, only using HTML and CSS, because if we would use this also UI5 control based, it would then have more dependency to be loaded. To make it only HTML and CSS based, it can be loaded faster, and the loading of the placeholder itself doesn't take too long. How you can enable the placeholder inside UI5. We think that I think the most convenient place is adding some new configuration inside your routing configuration. So we created actually two new properties. One is called the HTML, the other one is called autoclose. So with the HTML, I bring you here also an example. With the HTML property, you can specify where UI5 can load this HTML markup. So inside, it's typically you simply add some div element there with some CSS class there, but you need to name it as an HTML fragment. Doing this way will make the UI5 bundling also include this file into your components preload to make the loading of the placeholder also faster. And with the auto close, you can say, okay, I now don't have currently a better time point to hide the placeholder. You can set the auto close to true, because we have actually a general time point to hide the placeholder. You will see it later in a diagram, but I think every application should at the end set this one to false, because each application is different and the application itself actually has a better control of the timeline. So the application should know better than general UI5 when a placeholder should be hidden. So these two properties can be defined in the target option in a route. This means that once this route is matched, and then the placeholder will be shown when the target is displayed. But you can also say that I want to add the placeholder to a specific target. This means no matter where this target displayed, whether in route A or in route B, this placeholder will be shown. So these are the two ways that you can connect the placeholder to a target. And talking about the timeline, like showing and hiding, I also here have a diagram. So let's have a look and give you a better overview about the timeline. So once a target is displayed inside UI5 routing, we first wait for the root view to be loaded, because the container where we can show the placeholder is actually inside the root view. As soon as the root view is ready, we will immediately show the placeholder to make this happen as early as possible. But in the meantime, so the main task is to load this target. Either it's a view or a component that will be loaded with this target. So after the loading is finished, we will create an instance of this view or component, and then we will add this instance to the container. And this container is actually the same container as where we show the placeholder. So this is actually, after this is done, this is actually the time point where we hide the placeholder once the autoclose is set to true. But still, the data loading for the model inside your application for the view is not finished yet, because the binding context of the model is just propagated into the view. That's why the loading of the data is just triggered. So for the application, if you know a better time point, later you will see in demo that we use the data received event for hiding the placeholder. And this will be after where we hide the placeholder in the autoflow. So we highly recommend the application find a better time point to hide the placeholder by yourself. And in the end, the placeholder will be hidden, and you will see the final UI elements inside your application. So now let's jump directly to a demo. So I have here, we have actually an early adopter inside SAP. Inside the Fiori Element library, you may already heard about this already. So they have created several placeholder HTML markups, which can be used inside the Fiori Element-based application. And here I have a demo running in my local machine. After I click this tile, so just pay attention to the loading, to the beginning of the loading, you will see the placeholder. So this is actually the placeholder designed for this screen. So this screen is actually called a list report with a list inside below a header area. And once I drill down into the detail screen of an item, so I simply click here, you will see a placeholder will also be shown for the detail area. And of course, when I now refresh the whole page, you will expect that two placeholders will be shown, one for the left side and the other one for the right side. And depending on the loading speed, one may finish before the other. So, and because we also talk about like using CSS, then it could be also, it could benefit also from the theming engine from UI5, which means now I change the theme to the dark one. So if I now reload the page, you will see the placeholder is also shown in a dark flavor. So maybe you will ask now whether I can have this feature also for my application, which is not based on the Fiori element. Yes, you can. We have here a shopping cart. This is one of our demo applications for the OpenUI5 project. So here you see when loading it, nothing is built into it yet regarding the placeholder. So I will do it with you together, building one placeholder inside. So I have here my editor. So I will first open the placeholder. I prepared a very simple placeholder for this demo. So let's have a look here. So this placeholder cannot be simpler. So it only has a div inside with a class. And inside the CSS class, I simply set the background color to a semi-transparent red. And we'll then build this placeholder into the application. And now I have some code snippet here prepared to make it faster. So I copy this part, do it again. So now we put it into the manifest.json, because the view that will be used there is called home. So this is the home target. We simply add the placeholder configuration here. And this, with the HTML property, we simply point to the place where the placeholder is now created. And we first set the auto close to false to make sure that everything's working. In the end, after I refresh, reload the application, we will see this semi-transparent div left there. So now I hope everything's working. Why it's hidden? So let me have a look. This is really the demo effect. I don't know why. Auto close should be false. So let me do it again. I have no idea why it's hidden, but it seems like it's having auto close true behavior right now. But we will continue with our demo. So what we actually want to achieve here is it find a better time point for hiding the placeholder. So as we talked already inside during with the PowerPoint, we want to use the data received event. So I need to change some code inside the controller. So I have here, I added something more. I simply delete this in it because I have it already in my snippet. What I added here is one route matched handler for the route home, because to hide the placeholder manually, you actually need to have a container, because this is the place where you call the API to hide the placeholder. So the container will be delivered to you inside the event of the route match, and you can get this container under the parameter name target control. So we save it to the controller itself. Yes.
There was one comment also from Joseph about the auto close parameter. Is it with the uppercase C or is it?
Should be uppercase according to the sources.
Yes. So I don't know why it's changed at the end. Thank you for the tip. So yeah, I think it's because of the typo. I don't know why it's changed to small c. So we will see it again. So I hope I have the code is not saved yet, so it's okay. So we only change the manifest. You are right. So the auto close is actually has a default value to true. That's why it's hidden automatically. So now you see the auto close true also works. Yes. So we will set it to false. Yes. So we simply go back to the controller. Let's continue programming. So here we save the container, and we have here a data received a function which will be connected to the binding of the items inside the list. So we will do this later. So inside the data received function, we will get we have the container already, and then we call hide placeholder by passing the area where the placeholder is currently shown. And I think what is now missing is the inside the view. So inside the view, we have here a list with this item aggregation binding to the items aggregation. I now need this code snippet. Copy it. And then I find this view here and simply delete the items. Complete binding. So what I added here is the H1 event handler connected to the data received event to this aggregation binding. So now If I now refresh, you will see the placeholder will be shown there for a little bit long time after the list is there, so it will be hidden. So with this, I think I have everything that I want to tell you finished. So as I said, this is a preview version of the feature. You will get more updates from our side. So thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Nice feature. One question. So you have like just a plain HTML file, right? To use it as a placeholder, right? So and Fiori Elements, you don't point to this file directly, right? It's out of box existing template of the placeholder with animations and everything, right? And in the final solution, do you have any plans to provide these pre-made placeholder screens for custom apps? Because for now we are pointing out to any HTML file which will be used as a placeholder while loading, but can we expect something out of box from SAP, like used for the form, for example, for the table, like existing templates without any additional HTML files?
So I can give you some updates about this question. So inside Fiori Element demo, so where the placeholder used there is also a simple HTML file with some CSS implement there. So you'll see the animation is actually achieved by using the CSS-based animation. There's no dynamic JavaScript code running behind.
Yeah, that's clear. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay.
It's more about the reuse.
Like the template for element, they should be available, right, in that open source package for reuse that Fiori Elements provide. So if you reference it there, it should be possible, right?
Yeah, basically we should see how we can make this reusable, because I think having these kind of templates also for tables, for forms and stuff like that available for these placeholders, that you can connect them and put them together and make them available as HTML fragments here in this case for the placeholders. I think this should be really an essential piece here.
Also what they have shown is kind of scheming capabilities. They should be built in.
That should come out of the box with that solution what's there. So we need to make this reusable, these parts.
If you provide some custom visuals, so I think it may be not so Fiori style placeholders. So I want to avoid such stuff. So it will be cool if something like stylish comes from router itself, like it pulls by default some placeholder, fancy placeholders. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some example placeholders that then the customers or users can adapt to their UI slightly. That would be really nice.
There was this question in the chat. Is it a standard feature or a custom one? It's a standard feature, no? Jiawei? Yes, it's a standard feature. So those two properties that you can set to a loading target will be a standard feature. But what is currently missing, or what has to be done by the application right now, is to have a placeholder designed for your application. So we currently only have this Fiori element-based placeholder created for those templates inside Fiori element. But other than that, the application has to create the placeholder by itself.
Good. So
I have one more question. Sorry, Peter, you still have 20 minutes. The question is about the theming. You say you also showed it works with a dark theme as well. When you have a custom theme, is it like based on the theme parameters, or how do you do that in your CSS? Is this possible even?
I think if you want to benefit from the theme engine, you need to use also connect to our existing theme parameters. Otherwise, cannot be themeable.
So this is a topic for the moment. I would say that we still need to connect this to the theme parameters. We are still on the way forward to move to CSS custom properties or CSS variables with our theming, that this is possible to use this for your custom controls, or for your, also in this case for the placeholders, this could be used finally. So this is still work in progress. to complete that topic. But once this is available, hopefully in one of the next releases, we can also show that here in that round, how to use that and how to benefit from these CSS custom properties then for your notepad controls for these scenarios like HTML, CSS with placeholders and stuff like that. And then this would be also benefit from our theming finally.
Yeah, so you say the CSS variables will soon be usable. You can use them in their own custom CSS for controls, placeholders, and any plain CSS. So they will automatically get the colors that are configured in the theme, right?
Yeah. At
Sounds
the moment,
good.
it's still an experimental feature. But I think we had this a while back. So if we can also show that soon, once this feature is really officially available, then this makes sense to also show that in that round. Okay. So then I think I take over, right? Okay, today I want to talk a bit about the UI5 Web Components enablement as a follow-up topic from that what I showed already at the UI5Con keynote nearly 2 months back now. And yeah, here in this case, I want to really give a heads up on what's possible now since we integrated at that point of time. I showed you an early sneak preview on that, and it was not possible to play around with that feature already on your own. It's now possible. So we integrated the UI5 Web Components into the UI5 framework now as a kind of an add-on. I come to that in a second. And this integration started with UI5 192.0. We added 3 new libraries to the open UI5 code base. It's the SAP UI Web C Common, it's SAP UI Web C Main, and SAP UI Web C Fiori. Why 3 module or libraries at the end? So the first library is the somehow the base classes. And the second, we have the bread and butter controls. It's a bit like the sap.m library. And we have the Web C Fiori. So all Fiori related components go into that library, which do not belong to the bread and butter components. It's not yet in SAP UI5 distribution. This has some reasons also because we want to make changes or to be able to make changes to that. And once it's submitted to the SAP UI5 or integrated in the SAP UI5 distribution, this will immediately have then also the requirement that we have to stay compatible, and then we are not, we cannot easily make some changes. I think there will be not much changes anymore, but to be safe side, we want to get your feedback now first, and that's why I also bring that up again here in this UI5ers live session, that you see how to use that and that you are able also to give feedback to us. So let's start first with the Open UI5 GitHub repository. Here in the Open UI5 GitHub repository, where we just see the 3 new libraries, SAP UI Web C Common, Fiori Main. And in the common library, the interesting part is that there is a new base class, Web Component JS, and Web Component Metadata, Web Component Renderer. So all the 3 assets, which are at the end the base classes for all the web components which are integrated as wrappers. So these control wrappers we create in SAP UI5 to connect the lifecycle of the UI5 framework together with the web components lifecycle. So this is all the base part herein. It also brings the third party with, so we package the third party. At the moment, it's UI5 Web Components RC14, which is integrated in that. We will also soon upgrade to the RC15, that this is in sync here for the next 194.0 snapshot version we are currently going forward. Just to have a quick look into the bread and butter controls, so Web C Main. Here we see, for example, the button JS, and here this is a typical wrapper component. It also comes with JS docs since we need that for the TypeScript generation and stuff like that. I come to that also a bit later, and also for our documentation for sure. We generate that more or less out of the information we get from the web components. But here you see also the base class web component is being used here underneath, and the button is extending that. And here we get then some metadata which are specific to that, the library, which tag to be used for the web component inside UI5. In UI5, by the way, we always suffix our web components with a -UI5 suffix to avoid clashes with using web components directly together in combination with the UI5 web components enablement in Open UI5 SAP UI5, because tags can only be registered once, and then if they are registered, then this is mainly already somehow like a singleton being used, and you cannot replace that or use it with a different version. So with that, we are safe that we have our own version for that. And you see all the properties and stuff like that. This is also finally used for our documentation to get that in. And there is not more inside, so it's just defining these properties. The rest comes automatically from the web component base class. It takes care, for example, that the width goes to the style. And some properties are going then to the attributes of the tag, and this happens automatically behind the scenes. But now let's go and see how this is being used. So I start already again with the easy UI5, because there we have this template for the TypeScript application, which I showed at the UI5 con. There's also this blog post available. So I create my application now with Open UI5 and 193.0, because this is the latest version available since around, I think, 1 or 2 days now. And basically I use this as a starting point for my project. I created that already upfront, but I want to be sure that everything is in stage. And now let's open Visual Studio Code for this application. And you will remember this is really this standard template for the TypeScript applications we have. We have this package JSON, for sure. We have the UI5 YAML in the package JSON. All this Babel stuff for transpiling is in, it's the Open UI5. The TypeScript types are already configured for the JavaScript part. The UI5 CLI and all this is in live reload middleware, all that what we expect from that, how we want to develop. And there is the source folder. And in the source folder, I see then my, my application. And this is now really this simple application, what we have developed here for the TypeScript to really see how the things are put together finally. And when I start that, I get this real basic application with my say hello button. If I click it, it can be used. Now, everything which is being used here is based on the sap.m controls. So if we look into that view here, the main view or the app view, we have this message page, and there the button, everything is coming from sap.m. But now what we want to do is we want to use web components here inside. So first of all, what I need to do is I need to add the library SAP UI5 main as the library. And thanks to the CLI, it installs that, it updates my UI5 YAML, adds the dependency to that, the webc main. And to be sure that this library is being preloaded, I'm also adding the dependency in the manifest that this is then being preloaded up front already. I can also omit that because nevertheless it's running debug mode by default. Now if I start again, then I will be able to modify the application and use the web components here directly inside. And I want to use it now in the XML view to showcase that this is really integrated. And here I say XML namespace, webcm, and I use SAP UI5 main as a library for the webcm. And instead of a message page, I'm using now a page because it wants to have here in the buttons, the M buttons inside, but I just want to have my own button, my web component button. And here I throw away all the stuff I don't need, because this is not necessary. And here inside that, I put now the webcm button. The text is hello world. And if I save, on the right-hand side, the application should be updated. And I should see my hello world button. So now I can really use the web components, and let's see whether all the other stuff is working. So for example, the event handler, the click event is the event for the WebC button. And I want to also use the say hello function. So this is for sure working. If I do that, the app preloads, I can click, the say hello is coming up. And now let's make a bit more advanced feature by adding an input and then write some code showing to you also the TypeScript stuff is also enabled for that. So let's use the input. WebCM input. I should have added this plugin to get the completion for that. Value here in this case is hello world, just keep it the same. And in both cases, we give it an ID to be able to access the elements then directly from the controller button. So now let's go to the controller part. So I have here now my inputs. I want to add the horizontal layout. I forgot that, to be safe that everything is properly aligned. There is in the RC14 still some issue in the web components that they are not aligned properly. Therefore, I'm using now a layout. And the layouts are by default not part of the web components because in the web components, we assume that you typically use native HTML to do the layouting stuff. But here inside UI5, you don't have that, and you can use the layout. Let's use the vertical layout and put that underneath. Close it, save it. And now we should have a proper alignment below. And now I go to the controller because I want to make now and connect input and button, that if I change the input, I see the changes or the text in the button. And if the say hello is being pressed, I want to see the text of the button. So now as the first thing, I import these two ES modules for the button. So you see here, it's the SAP UI WebC button. I select this one and I do the same for the input. So I have these two inputs here, and now I can use them here directly. Const, let's say the button is this by ID. So we get already the completion here for that. And then I refer to the button. I cast it as the button. And the same I do for the input. This by ID, input, and I cast that as an input. Now I can say input, and I want to attach an event. Let's use the change event here in this case. And I don't need the event parameter, so I just use the underscore to avoid that. And now I say input button dot set text. I get also here the code completion for that. And IPT get value. And what I also want to do is in the say hello below, I want to show the text from the button. So, and now you see this is all very easy, also handy in going together with our TypeScript enablement. If I now do the changes, everything is then properly working already. I have the event, I see the update here. So this really feels like completely tightly integrated in the UI5, and for sure also data binding and stuff like that is working. We see that also we can, for example, use here this I18N of the data binding, assign that here to the value just to showcase that, that this is also working. Data binding works properly as well with the web components. And I also want to show you as the last thing, the Fiori library. So we have the shell bar component. If you want to use the Fiori, then you need to add the SAP UI WebC Fiori library to that. This is also being added. We added as well to the manifest for the preload stuff when it's being properly bundled. And in the view, I can now add for the WebC Fiori an own namespace. And instead of the app page, for example, I just use the shell bar now, so I get rid of all other stuff. Let's see, WebCF shell bar is the component. WebCF shell bar. And if you want to see what is available, then you can go also to the playground of the web components. That's what I then also do, because I don't know all the properties out of the box. So here in the shell bar, for example, we see that it's coming from the Fiori. So if it's coming from Fiori, then this is SAP UI5 Fiori component. If it comes like, for example, the slider from UI5 Web Components, then this comes from the SAP UI WebC main library. So in here, I want to set the primary title now and say show notifications. So primary title, and here we use the I18N from here. And from my point of view, I can also say show product switch equals true. So that's the stuff for the shell bar, saving that. And start again. I missed to start. That's my last part. Now the application starts, and I have my shell bar on top. I have my input in, I have my text, the product switches there. So basically, this is really roughly shown what is possible now. It's available as part of OpenUI5. You can play around with that, can give feedback on that to us. So report the issues on github.com OpenUI5, SAP OpenUI5, and then we can also follow up with these topics here. And with that, I'm at the end of my part.
With that, you are ready for questions, yeah? And
Yeah.
we have one question, I think, that came up earlier already from Marcel. Are there any plans to integrate these UI5 Web Components in existing libraries like sap.m to have UI5 Web Components as a single source of truth?
Yeah.
Would that be technically possible? That's maybe also something that we can
I think the main problem what we have with that is that the internals of these UI components are different than the internals of our UI5 controls. And there are still people relying on styling, adopting, let's say, our classic button control, the sap.m button control, or doing some stuff with that, which is maybe related to the API, and this cannot be 100% guaranteed. That's why we also put it next to that and have a separate library for that. So in the beginning, it was also my wish to replace the controls one-to-one, but in reality, with all that expectations and how people use the UI5 controls, is not easily possible to replace them one by one.
Okay, then you have two other questions. I hope we still can do it. From Florian, he said, like, general, why should I use web components in a classic UI app? Will there be any web components not available in the UI5 framework?
Yeah, this is a good question. So basically, the bread and butter controls, there may be a good question when and where to use that. So if you are maybe in a classic environment where already M controls are being used, it may be not so optimal to switch them to the web components. If you start from scratch, building new applications, you can benefit from the web components because also how they are built and from their possibility to create optimized bundles, they are much better because web components are more atomic than our UI5 controls are. UI5 controls always need this library bracket with the CSS then being part of the library. And this is a different architecture for the web components where we can really also bundle the web component as an atomic thing, having the behavior, the CSS, and the texts also very isolated, and this makes it possible to have smaller bundles in the future. So for new apps, web components and standalone apps, web components, I would say, are a way forward. But for, let's say, if you are in a Fiori Launchpad environment where already M controls are in, there is not really a need to switch to that. An interesting part maybe is the second question, or second part of your question. Will there also be web components available which are not available as UI5 controls? And yes, this will take place. There may be also additional web components in the future available, maybe as an outlook. We are looking into, for example, a map control for that, and this may be something which will not be rebuilt as a UI5 control. So this will be then only available as web components and via the UI5 Web Components enablement, and available also for SAP UI5, Open UI5. Let's have to see how that looks like from a license perspective at the end. But there are modern new controls will be mainly developed then as web components, and then reused in Open UI5, SAP UI5 world.
Let me quickly add. So obviously what Peter said was everything correct, but from my perspective, the really short version is, as Peter said, now, lately, we want in the future to only develop new stuff as web component, and then enable it again in UI5 to don't have this double invests. Therefore, over time, you will get in touch with web components. Would I currently recommend you to rebuild anything just for the sake of using web components? No, certainly not. That's maybe the very short answer. Yeah.
There are still two questions.
Yeah. Just go ahead.
Okay, so there is maybe the second from Florian is, will existing control aggregations be enhanced that they can include web component controls? I don't know if it's...
Yeah, this is an interesting point. At the message page, this is one example where we have the buttons, and web component buttons are different than, let's say, the buttons from SAP UI5. This, may be enhanced. I'm not sure yet on that. But what is definitely the case is that web components are also a control by itself. So all aggregations which are taking controls will also accept web components. In this special case, we have to look into that. I would say also that this should be possible, but it's work in progress. So maybe we have to define then proper interfaces which allow them to have then either the UI5 web components buttons and or the M buttons integrated there.
One also has to see where it really makes sense, because just replacing the M button in the M message page, the web components button doesn't really give you any benefit. So in this case, you wouldn't probably invest to enable it, but in other cases, it might make sense.
Yeah, this is indeed true. So maybe if the components, as you said, Andreas, related to M library, maybe exclusively M potentially, but things like the layout library, for example, which could be shared and necessary to be shared also for web components for the UI5 programming model, this makes then also sense to be enabled to allow all either web components or M controls or other controls to be added.
Okay, and then last one, extending the web components is perspective will remain the same as with regular controls?
Depending on what you want to do there. So accessing the internals, this rendering of the web components is not that easy anymore, because with the shadow DOM isolation, we have a more or less a border to access the internals. But I think it's even not so bad to not allow that anymore at any case. Yeah, there are possibilities also for web components to do that styling or modify the styling of that, or rendering of that, but it requires more an explicit way. And but overall extending the behavior parts, this may be also possible like before.
Maybe.
Yeah, this will be possible like before, because there is no change.
Okay, that's what I want, because it sounded like we still have to think about it, but
yeah, always is precise. It is nailed down.
Yeah. So I think that were the questions. There's also nothing in the chat, and we are again over time. So thanks for all who stayed with us till the end. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Yeah. So, and again, thanks Jiawei for the demo. Also Peter for preparing this, and
yeah, play around with that. Give us feedback, and see you next time.
See you then. So, bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah.